to present the future of immigration. To begin, my name is Julianne. I'm the current curator of the Global Shapers Cleveland Hub. And to give a little background on Global Shapers, we have a short video to play for you.
Global Shapers is a community of young leaders who drive dialogue, action, and change in different communities around the world.
An informed and empowered young generation that can hold governments and business accountable and shape their communities.
Meeting people that share the same vision for your community, the same vision for the world. The biggest tool we have to make change is dialogue.
The Global Shapers, to me, is the platform for action for change for the millennial generation across the world. We're currently facing trends and global crises that need to be addressed in the most collaborative spirit.
In Ahmedabad Hub, we are working on shaping education. So Global Shaper community totally gives that platform, that strength, that motivation, and that vision.
The cooperation among hubs could make a difference in shaping projects locally, but that have a national impact.
What we're doing is we're trying to engage our shaper communities from around the world to take action on climate.
We want more people based in China know the world better. So we host international events to let people have more free dialogue with each other.
I am from Kakuma refugee camp. It's about 185,000 refugees. And we have a Kakuma hub, which is the first hub ever in a refugee camp. I met the other shapers, and then I started to understand what this was all about.
You ask someone like, what are you working on? You discover that, wow, he's in Ecuador and working on something that's very similar to what you're working on in Cairo. And why not to collaborate and like discover more potential?
So it's really great to hear the projects they're doing and thinking about how can we grow and replicate this in our own communities, in our own context.
It is through this inspiration that we get from one another that we're actually to drive an agenda forward in which change becomes possible.
And these thousands of global shapers from more than 400 cities around the world, when they come together, they speak and act on behalf of the 3.5 billion young people that represents half of the world's population.
Then together, you are so powerful and can really influence change.
I'm very optimistic that we can create a better future for the coming generations.
We're the Global Shapers.
Cleveland has the distinction of being the only hub in Ohio, and we're thrilled to represent Cleveland on the global stage through this platform. If you're interested in learning more about Global Shapers, we'll throw in our website on the chat, and we're also active on social media and always looking for new young members to join us in our mission to make social impact. But tonight I'm excited to introduce the incoming curator, the next leader of our hub, Kwame, as well as our new partnership with Black environmental leaders. So I'll let Kwame share a bit more about both exciting new updates for us.
Thank you so much, Julianne. Good afternoon, everybody. You are all welcome to this event. I am personally very excited to see you all here. So my name is Kwame Bachwe. I am the incoming curator for the Global Shapers Cleveland Hub, continuing the very incredible work that Julianne has done in the past very difficult year with COVID and everything. So really excited to have you here. As you saw in the video briefly, the Global Shapers is a global, yet very localized network of over 10,000 young people scattered all across the world in over 400 cities, working in their respective cities to drive dialogue, action, and impact. And so the Global Shapers Cleveland stays true to this mission in the things that we do. So we have projects that we do across the board, and this event or conversation series, which we kicked off last month, is one of those events that we have. And we are also excited to mention that we just announced as of this morning a very exciting partnership with the Black environmental leaders who will be acting as the fiscal sponsors for Global Shapers, and also working with us to really incubate and build a pipeline of young environmental or intergenerational environmental leaders within the sectors here. So the event series itself that we have, this event series is dubbed Shaping the Future. And the idea is to bring together young people and have them have conversations with, local civic and political leaders about some of the very pressing issues that we have within this region. So we kicked this off with Senator Nina Turner, where we were talking about shaping the future of politics. And today we are very excited to be hosting Mr. Joe Cimperman, who I know very personally through Global Cleveland, which has been an incredible organization to me as an immigrant who is in this space and made Cleveland feel more like home for me. So really excited to be having this conversation with Joe. And I'm also really excited to introduce Samantha Ryder, who is going to be moderating the conversation today. And just a quick form of introduction. So Samantha is a former global shaper who kickstarted this really exciting event that we have called Culture Plea, where we, give Clevelanders the opportunity to experience food from elsewhere and have it be a platform for cultural exchange. So having said that, I will stop talking now and hand it over to our moderator, Sam.
Thank you, Kwame, and welcome everybody. A few quick housekeeping things before we get started. All of you are muted, but you can feel free to answer or ask any questions at any time by using the chat. In the chat, you can direct your questions to Kwame, and then we will have time at the end to have yourselves unmute and also to ask questions and have a live Q&A with our wonderful guest today. And so I have the great honor of introducing our guest. I'd like to welcome Joe Cimperman, who's president of Global Cleveland. He is a true advocate. He's had a 30+ year career in Cleveland here. We're going to get into his work at Global Cleveland in a moment. But first, prior to serving at Global Cleveland, he served as a Cleveland City Councilman for 18 years. Among the many progressive issues that he led from council, he helped create a more welcoming and inclusive city for immigrants and refugees. He crafted policy, he led and funded several strategic initiatives to cultivate a culture that welcomed all, and also provided wraparound services to assist newcomers in making Cleveland their home. As president of Global Cleveland, he has spent years reinvigorating Cleveland's reputation by crafting and creating strategic partnerships that not only welcome our international community to create a home here in Cleveland, but help them grow professionally, help them excel in their careers, and have families here in Northeast Ohio. Under his leadership, programs such as Global Rising, Community Navigators, and many more have helped Global Cleveland become the go-to resource for the Cleveland immigrant community, and also help the world see us as a great option for a migration for second and third locations for home. I could spend the whole hour introducing ways that he has worked towards to helping make Northeast Ohio a more welcoming and equally important, a city primed to help newcomers thrive. But we're going to need all this time to talk to Joe this evening. And so I'd like to kick it off by asking Joe if you could start with some welcoming remarks and share a little bit about what's new at Global Cleveland.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I really appreciate it. It's nice to see you again virtually and nice to be with you. And thank you for the collaboration and leadership you showed when I had the honor to work with you at City Hall. Samantha, really appreciate it. To Kwame and to Julianne and to everyone and Luciana and everyone on this call, Global Shapers, thank you very much for the work that you do. It's so important, obviously, for the work that you're doing for the people who are here, but the work that you're doing as well for the people who are yet to come. And I knew that the Global Shapers chapter in Cleveland was the only one in Ohio. I would argue it's not, even if there were 5 other Global Shapers, ours would be the best because we have such an amazing group of people who are so engaged and so obviously concerned about our world and the world here in Cleveland. So a little history, Global Cleveland began 10 years ago. We are in our 10th year. And our origin story is directly attributed to the fact that a lot of cities in the Great Lakes region, a lot of cities in the middle part of the United States decided 10 years ago that they wanted to more formalize the work that's going on in terms of welcoming immigrants, refugees, newcomers, secondary migrants, international students. So there are a lot of us that are experiencing our 10-year anniversary right now, 10th anniversary. Columbus is, Cincinnati is, as well as Toledo and Dayton, as well as a lot of other places throughout the Midwest with Detroit and Pittsburgh as well. So it's great to be in that place. Numbers are important. And 100 years ago, when you look at the decade between 1910 and 1920, here in the city of Cleveland, close to half of the population spoke English as a learning language. So when you look at that decade between 1910 and 1920, you look at the migration patterns that were happening from all over the world. You look at the migration patterns that were happening from the southern part of the United States. One would think that Cleveland would be at its most confusing moment, or at the moment of its greatest chaos, or at the time when you had more people from more places with different ideas. And how could anything be great, and how could anything be substantive? Demographers call that thought mixing. And they believe that it is at that moment when there is the highest point of diversity, that when people are in a community together, truly working together, that you get the greatest innovation. I would argue that places like the City Club, the Cleveland Foundation, and the Metro Parks, all of which share a 100th birthday in that decade, the fact that we had people here from all over the world had something to do with that thinking about how do we create something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the United States, but could only exist with the incredible diversity that we have. I'm excited at the conversation that we're going to have. Change is coming. And by that, I mean, it feels like there's a real awakening in Washington, D.C. about the power of our international sisters and brothers. Whether that is an economic development conversation, whether that is a population growth conversation, or whether it's America rediscovering her humanity. I think it's likely a bit of all three. And I'm really excited to learn things like by the end of next year, our numbers in the refugee resettlement program, which Cleveland has always been a leader because of our refugee resettlement agencies at Catholic Charities, Us Together, and USCRI, last year experienced an all-time low in the history of the refugee program that goes back almost 80 years, of 300 people, a total of about 300 people resettled in Cleveland, down from about 1,500 in 2016. Under the new administration and the new ethic coming out of Washington, the number is about to go up, back up to the 1,500, 1,600 mark by the end of next year. And hopefully that will be the standard then every single year as we continue to welcome new people. We're hearing from our colleges and universities that international student enrollment is not down, it's steady, if not increasing, which is an incredibly important thing. And through the great work of folks like Patrick Kearns at Refugee Response, there's a study that's been underway, a secondary migrant study, especially during this last year of COVID, where quite a few people, we're talking a few hundred, have moved to Cleveland from other parts of the United States because they found that they could have the quality of life here and a cost of living that was a lot more affordable. So Samantha, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I wanted to give a little bit of a history and where we are in the present time. And I'm looking forward to the dialogue with you and to the incredible people who are on this call.
Thank you. So many questions already. You mentioned a couple of times, and we've talked about Cleveland being a welcoming city. How do we rank, and how do you determine the welcomeness of a city, and how has that changed over time here in Cleveland?
It's a great question. So about 4 years ago, an organization called the New American Economy, and I would encourage anybody on this call, if you really want to get an apple to apple of the top 100 cities in the United States measurement of who's doing well, who's learning, who could do better, who's borrowing ideas from whom. The New American Economy, which is a division, if you will, of the Bloomberg Foundation out of New York City, they take about 70 factors and they measure cities apple to apple. So is your city recruiting diversity-wise in your police department? Yes, African-American, yes, Hispanic, but how many languages do the promotional materials go out to? How easy does your city hall work with communities where English is a learning language? What is the housing health of the immigrant communities? How many people are able to rise above the poverty level from the different immigrant communities writ large in your city? And part of the challenge, Samantha, was this is a 4-year-old survey. Mm-hmm. Global Cleveland is still saying to really, really important life-saving institutions in Cleveland, you've got to keep the data. So many of our organizations in Cleveland say, well, it's just our job. It's our job to serve. It's our job to feed people. It's our job to provide loans. It's our job to provide housing. And we know Cleveland's got a big heart, but that measurement of how they're taking care of the international community or ways in which they could do better is really important. First year we were ranked, which was 3 years ago, we were ranked 64th out of 100 cities. And there was something in that number that just seemed to me to be off. We
Yeah.
worked really, right? We worked really hard with a lot of folks and started to get a lot of feedback from people. And within 1 year, we moved up 50 places. We moved up to number 14, most welcoming city in America. Samantha, I knew we weren't 64. I knew we weren't 14. And where the number went back to last year was, I believe, the number 25. So we're in the top quarter of the most welcoming cities in America. But as a result of some of those things that we've learned, there's a lot more places now that are keeping data. There's also policy changes that have quietly taken place at City Hall. Under the leadership of Charmin Leon, a sergeant who was leading the diversity and recruitment efforts for the police department, information started to go out in Swahili. Information was going out in Arabic. There was a real effort to work with the Nepali and Bhutanese community in Cleveland to get a cadet from that community to be in the police department. So as you know, change is slow. In places like Cleveland, sometimes it's a little bit too slow, but it's a great measurement. And I would just encourage anybody to listen or to look up the New American Economy, because in addition to the city by city index, it's got great data on real information in real time that benefits our immigrant newcomer community.
Thank you. Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned at City Hall, some of the policies that have changed, but in what other ways has public policy shaped immigration into Northeast Ohio? And is it, and with the new administration, is it changing? Is it improving? And do you expect to see that trickle down into, like you said, more people moving into our area?
Well, it's a really interesting question, Samantha. We've always had an open door with Mayor Jackson. We've always had an open door with County Executive Budish. We've always had an open door with Governor DeWine. We're one of those rare places when we go to national conferences where our red governor and our blue county executive and our blue mayor, there's really this understanding about needing to be more welcoming toward immigrants. I'll share this with you. We're an organization that's not political. We got really politically involved 2 years ago when Secretary Pompeo continued to make the job of bringing refugees to states harder and harder and harder. He changed the policies as our Secretary of State 3 times in 1 month. Governor DeWine was the first governor in the country before New York, before New Jersey, before California, who wrote a letter to President Trump and said, we want our share of refugees. That letter was followed by our county executive and our mayor. So there's some policies that are just pretty much a given that they all really understand. Where it's a little bit trickier, we're working on some certification issues right now with the state. There's states like New Jersey and Colorado who have been supernovas in terms of getting a lot of Latina and Arabic speaking nurses into the workforce by speeding up the certification process. And so, you know, we know that we're a town that has a lot of medical and educational folks. We've got a lot of people that are coming here that, as you know, Samantha, we call it in this field, brain waste. You know, the dignity of work, you know, to quote our phenomenal senator, Senator Brown, the dignity of work is what it is. If someone is sweeping a floor or they're operating, they're both really important jobs for the ongoing life of a community. But so often we find that person who's sweeping the floor back home in Damascus was working in a lab testing for bloodborne pathogens. And so what we have to do as a nation and as a region is get better at getting people more quickly into their field of expertise, because I will tell you right now, we are getting 12 calls a week because the talent pipeline is so dry. And if there's one thing that's going to shake America from her xenophobia, it's going to be things like Cedar Point can't operate a full week because they don't have the workers. I can't get my Big Mac the way and the time I want it because there's not enough people. Hospital waits are going to be longer. And so we continue to drill home on the economic development fact, because there's a few things that we say. We say immigration is economic development, and we say to immigrate is an entrepreneurial act.
And speaking of talent development, how do our local universities, how does Cleveland State and Case Western, how do they help attract immigrants and students from around the world and to come to Northeast Ohio?
They do a great job. We're lucky at Case Western, and, you know, full disclosure, my board chair is David Fleshler, who's the Vice Provost of International Student Affairs. He is the magnet of internationalism at Case Western. He's really grown the program and he's done it amazingly. There was somebody that we had the privilege to work with at Cleveland State. He's on this call right now. He left to lead another program in another state, another heartland state, Ali Sultan Shahi, who was at Cleveland State. But when Ali was there, he really established a program that I think Cleveland State is going to become as competitive with Case Western as any other university in Ohio. The problem, Samantha, is not the universities being able to attract amazing international students. They do a great job of that. Mm-hmm. The problem is that we have employers who still don't get that they have greatness right in our community. And if they give them an internship, if they give them a fellowship, if they give them an opportunity and stop listening to this, oh, it's so hard. And I don't know about visas. And, we don't have anybody in our firm that has a hijab and what's lunch going to be like? And can I say the things I say, when I'm with my pastor? And it's just like, are you looking for talent or not? And so we continue to say to companies, give our sisters and brothers a chance, because we are finding over and over again that the skill levels that the newcomers who come here, whether they're in the refugee program, the international student program, or straight immigration, are really exactly what our region needs in terms of its talent pipeline.
And how can employers and agencies like Global Cleveland help kind of break down those myths and those misunderstandings that make it more difficult for our newcomer population to thrive in the workforce here locally?
Well, I'm very lucky. I work with a brilliant young woman, Supriya Tamang, who is from Nepal, and she does a lot with our students who are here on their curricular professional training, CPT or OPT. Those are two programs that allow international students to work for companies. We don't say this very publicly, but in a lot of ways, it's almost like a trial run for companies to see how that person fits the culture. We are constantly reaching out to companies who are looking for extra hands, but are looking to diversify their workforce. Cleveland is getting really good about addressing our need to be anti-racist, about the fact that we've got systemic issues in place that have kept the African-American community out of every single important decision and the things that white men like me benefit from with privilege. The Latinx community, I think, is also getting paid attention to, although I would say that once you get past the conversation between our African-American sisters and brothers and some of our Spanish-speaking sisters and brothers, the cliff is very steep. International individuals in our community are often completely invisible. And we continue to say, we can't other people, right? These are people who have chosen us, right? People who are coming to Cleveland often have a lot of other choices, whether it's New York, more likely Toronto, or places that didn't have the 4 years that we just experienced as a nation. And so we have to do what we can. That being said, Samantha, over the last 10 years, the population growth in Northeast Ohio and Cuyahoga County has been at almost 3,300 and up every year because of immigrants. There have been over 3,300 people since 2010 to 2020 who have been born outside the United States year after year who have moved in. That net gain of 35,000 is why Ohio only lost one congressional seat. And I'll say this to you, and people don't like to hear this. Yes, our native-born population is declining. The families aren't growing as fast as they can. If we want the quality of life that we know our community that has to survive, it is going to be because of the blessings of immigrants. And so it's not even a question of should we or is it a good tool. Global Cleveland is trying every single day to work with the intermediaries in Cleveland to say, we have to make our policies more welcoming. We have to send the message out that this is a place that people can call home. And how do we do that, Samantha? By helping the people who are already here, because they're the best communicators to people from the nations in which they come from to say, this is a place where you can make a life.
And are there still services and wraparound services that we're missing that are crucial to fostering that environment of inclusiveness for these newcomers? Or have we figured out a lot of the, like you said, the bilingual and multilingual services, or is Cleveland still working through a lot of those issues?
Yes and no. I would say that there's so many people that want to help, but let me give you an example of a real crisis that we're experiencing. And if a crisis can be good, this is a good one, but it's one that is really serious nonetheless. In 2016, when we had about 1,400 people here through the refugee program, there was a network of quite a few hundred landlords. And some of these landlords, especially with organizations like Catholic Charities led by Tom Roscoe in an amazing way, had relationships with landlords that spanned over 20, 30 years. Year after year, that lease was renewed. It was a family from Iraq this year, a family from Congo the next year, a family from Afghanistan this year, and a family from Guatemala the next year. Because the numbers were cut so precipitously and so mercilessly and so quickly, we went from that 1,500, 1,600 number down to about 1,200, down to about 800, down to about 500, down to 300. As a result of that incredible decline, when we have that 1,600 number back, there's only about 20% of the housing left available for refugees today that was there in 2016. Why? 3 reasons, Samantha. One, there are certain communities where refugees were moving into, Detroit, Shoreway, Ohio City, Tremont, even Clark Metro. Housing isn't affordable anymore, right? Yeah. Those neighborhoods have seen the changes. You can call it whatever you want, gentrification, the winds of change, it's happened. 2, some of the houses just weren't great. And so they were either demolished or the landlord decided to fix them up, and those properties aren't available. The 3rd reason, and this is a really interesting one, families that are poor make up a lot of Northeast Ohio, and these landlords needed to make their mortgage, and so they rented to a different family. So as a result of that, by this time next year, and I'm saying this to everybody in the call, if you are a landlord and you know a landlord of somebody who wants to have their rent paid on time, have an amazing family as a tenant, understand that these are individuals who will build wealth very quickly and will have an incredible network, consider renting out a space. And we're doing everything we can. We were actually with the mayor of Maple Heights this afternoon, going on a tour of the city with one of the refugee resettlement agencies, because Mayor Blackwell has said she wants to make Maple Heights the most welcoming city to refugees in Northeast Ohio. That's what we need, Samantha. We need that across the region, and we need people to realize that it is up to me to make this thing work. It's not up to Greater Cleveland Partnership. It's not up to Global Cleveland. It's not up to City Hall, whoever the next mayor, whoever the county executive is going to be. It is a person-to-person experience, and that goes for tutoring, that goes for giving somebody a job, that goes for helping somebody rent. And what we're trying to do is get people into that kind of sensibility.
And if someone is interested in providing these opportunities, how do they go about connecting with the Northeast Ohio immigrant community? How do they go about sharing that they have these opportunities available to employ or to house newcomers?
If you, my email, Joe Global Cleveland, Samantha, I'm
probably just gonna email you.
No, I'm probably more of a traffic cop than I am anything else in terms of directing people. But we've got, I'll give you an example. Hilarities is hiring people now, at $15, $16, $17 an hour in hospitality. The different hotels are hiring people. We got a phone call today from a school in Ohio City that is run by Latina, brilliant women. They're looking for somebody to help them in the childcare position. It's just, there's so many opportunities, and they're looking for somebody who speaks Spanish. There's so many opportunities out there for people, and we just need to do this connecting. With housing, if somebody has housing, if somebody wants to email me, we share everything with our 3 refugee resettlement agencies. So us together, USCRI, Catholic Charities, and then the 3 support agencies that support them, that are a secondary line of support for refugees: Building Hope in the City, Asia, and Refugee Response. And it's this collective effort that's going to be the reason why we're going to be able to get to a place where by this time next year, hopefully we're welcoming, 3,800 people. In 2 years, that will be at 4,000. I mean, the better we take care of the people who are coming and already here, the more this community can grow. Understanding that there's federal issues, state issues, and other issues we have to work through. But I think in this case, effort counts for a lot.
Okay. Thank you. We're almost to our question and answer. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to submit them in the chat, or we can let you unmute here in a moment. But one last thing, Joe, it is Immigrant Heritage Month. Do you have any suggestions on ways that people on this call, or the younger community here in Cleveland can celebrate and support the local community and beyond June and throughout the year?
Well, it's always good to support, your local culinary favorite place, or to find a new place. We've got a page on our website that's got quite a few immigrant-led, refugee-led, immigrant-owned, refugee-owned restaurants. I would also say if you are an employer and you're looking to hire maybe one of the best employees you've ever had, consider hiring an immigrant or a newcomer. And, as things start to open up again, we're going to start having events. Samantha, we do a lot of events at Global Cleveland, and somebody says to me all the time that, we're like the House of Blues, right? We have so many different events. And I said, well, if we're the House of Blues where people feel that they can find a sense of community and home, the networking in Cleveland is so critical, which is why we started the program Global Rising last year. We think the Leadership Center does a great job, but we also know that there are specific things that immigrant leaders need. And so we started this program that met monthly, had really important speakers like Dr. Boutros, right? Awesome leader of a public hospital, immigrant. We had different people speaking from different perspectives. Lisa Blanchard, an amazing woman, she's on our board. She's this phenomenal engineer, HR expert from St. Lucia. And a lot of people really got a lot out of that. And I would just say to pay attention to the next couple of weeks. A big study is coming out that we worked on with an organization in Cleveland called Rust Belt Analytica that did some really hard research on the positive effect that immigrants have in Northeast Ohio in 2021. And if we were to do 2 or 3 things differently, how we could maximize that impact. And I'm hoping that that's going to be a study that really says to people, it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up to the greatness that's here.
All right. Thank you so much. So we have to read your study and we have to check out your website to see what upcoming events are coming up. Anything else that we should be aware of that's coming down the pipeline?
I would say Welcoming Week this year, which is always in September, is going to be really special. We're doing
What
something.
is Welcoming Week, Joe?
Welcoming Week is the time of year when NGOs like ours across the country really take time to highlight the effects of immigration. I'll say one thing to you, Samantha, as a son of an immigrant mom and as somebody who spoke English as a learning language when I was growing up. Slovenian was my first language. Cleveland sometimes gets too stuck in the lane of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Nostalgia is very dangerous. Nostalgia wasn't even true in the past, let alone the present. And what we try to do at Global Cleveland is, we want to get that big speaker who's got international policy chops, and we want to get that person who's got a perspective on this issue. But if it doesn't mean something for the immigrants who are here in terms of connecting or helping bring them here or make Cleveland a more welcoming place, not just for people who go to the Union Club, but for people like global shapers that are in the streets, that are door to door, that are living real lives of witness to welcome, then we shouldn't be doing our job. And so one of the things that we really try to do is to remind people that kindness is economic development and immigration is an entrepreneurial act. And if we can think through the lens of, so often, Samantha, in the United States, we hear over and over again this idea of the golden rule. Well, I was educated the other day by a young woman from Sri Lanka, and she told me, Joseph, don't worry about the American golden rule. Worry about the platinum rule. And I said, can you tell me what that is? And she said, the golden rule is treat others as you want to be treated. The platinum rule is treat me like I want to be treated. And I think about the voices of young people, and a young research associate we had last year who taught me a very important lesson, which is that change happens at the speed of relationship. And so if we can build these relationships in Cleveland between native born and immigrant, right? Mm-hmm. If we can look to people about how can I think through your perspective and what you need, not what I think you need, I think Cleveland's going to be in the place that we need to be in terms of being the most welcoming city in America by 2025.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to shift gears and we're going to take questions from the audience. We have our first question from Miss Amy Young. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question of our host?
I would. Thank you so much. There's so much here. There's so much that's going on. It's clearly a really layered and interdisciplinary question. I think my question to start would be about it seems like work placements or getting hired, and knowing full well that if someone is the only member of their community within a space over the long term, there is, inclusion, and then there's active inclusion and making sure that someone thrives in an environment that is absolutely new to them and that wasn't designed for them. So I'm wondering if there are any efforts, as I'm sure there are, or if any programs, what's feedback that you've gotten about those situations? What's being done for people who might be struggling in new work environments particularly?
Thank you, Amy, for that question. I'll give you 3 real-life examples. The first example I'll give is a sad one. A couple of years ago, there were a group of young employees of a bank in Cleveland, a very famous bank, and they were along the boardwalk on the Flatseas Bank, and they were accosted by somebody who basically, said the age-old, "Why don't you go home? Come, go back to where you came from." And these are individuals who are leaders in their specific industry in banking. And it was a whole group of these individuals. It was basically everybody from this specific country. And they came back and they talked to their HR person and they said, "We just don't feel welcome in Cleveland." And we were asked to get involved, and we did. And it was really a question around educating the greater Cleveland community and recognizing that these individuals who said these things that were very hurtful don't necessarily reflect the full perspective of Cleveland, but for them it did. And so we had to address that and figure out how to work through what I think was a pretty traumatic moment. We were working with a young woman from Saudi Arabia who was brilliant at this specific job. And we were pushing for an employer, a small business owner, family-owned, family-led, to hire this person within the field. It was an engineering field. And one of the managers said to me, "I'm a little bit reluctant to hire her because we don't really have anybody here who speaks Muslim." And I understood what the person was saying, and it kind of threw me for a little bit, but I recognized that what they were saying is we're not really culturally capable. There are amazing people in Cleveland that are led by incredible individuals who do that kind of cultural education. We've worked with somebody specifically who's really helped us a lot in terms of that. She helped us with Welcoming Week. She helps us with different things. And if you're looking for names of people, I'll share that with you. Now, here's the good story. When Samantha and I worked together at City Hall, we were approached by a company that's a leading supplier of plumbing material, not just in North America, but in a lot of parts of the globe: Mexico, Central and South America, Europe, et cetera. And they approached Samantha and Samantha, I don't know if you remember this, but they were asking for a change in the building code because they wanted to create a legal standing toilet in commercial spaces in Cleveland. And I thought, how brilliant, right? You're a toilet maker, you're a plumbing producer, you're looking for the next market, right? Talk about really being aware of what's going on in the globe. And they said, no, this isn't for product, this isn't for development, this would be for our shop on the west side near the airport. And Samantha and I were like, why would you ever do that? And they said, we want to help the people who now occupy the majority of our second shift, who are international, who come from nations where a standing toilet is standard.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to make that a place for them in our factory where they would feel that we're paying attention to their needs and where they feel comfortable in terms of maybe things that remind them of being back home. And I thought to myself, Odie Plumbing, you are a superstar company. So Amy, there's all these different examples I could give you, from crisis to isolation to integration. Obviously our hope is that everybody be more like Odie, but it's if people are willing to do that, and if they're willing to make that change, somebody like Nicole Baril has just been a phenomenal partner of ours in terms of working with people in terms of culture shift, and if somebody has an open heart, we have a ready hand.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And one other quick tip, as I work for a really large diverse company out of New York City, and we recently started, we have over 300 people spread out across the United States, and it's hard to bring everyone together over Zoom. And what they decided to do was do a series called Biopics. And we did one for Immigrant Heritage Month, where we had all of our staff who wanted to share and who was open to share their immigration story. And it was great. And people opened up and shared a little bit about themselves. And it was a really awesome way to get to know my coworkers, and just to hear about what brought them here and why they stayed, and what their journey has been like. We did one for Eid. We celebrated Eid with all of our colleagues, and we had all of our colleagues from around the world in different countries share like what it's like to celebrate Eid in the Philippines, what it's like to celebrate in Saudi Arabia, what it's like to, and we just keep, we have a Pride one coming up for this month, and to share what it means to be out in the workforce and to share what it means to be proud in the workforce. And it's really kind of helped us come together in this virtual world to learn about what makes us unique and what makes us work together as a team. And I think a lot of, like what Joe was saying, is a lot of it is just being willing to learn and to be open to how can I help, even if it's something that's just like, listening to someone share their story, or if something as big as remodeling your bathrooms to make them more inclusive. Like there's a lot you can do in the workforce, I think, to make them more inclusive and welcoming. So thank you. That was a great question. Thank you, Luciana, for sharing. If anyone does have a question, you can raise your hand, or please feel free to unmute yourself. We still have some time for some questions here. I know there's more questions nowadays.
I have a question, but there are also a couple questions in the chat that I can read out. So Joe, thank you. This is a really insightful conversation. So I think when I came to Cleveland originally to go to CASE, and Cleveland has kept me so far, and Joe is doing all he can to make sure Cleveland keeps keeping me. So thank you. I participated in the Global Rising program that Global Cleveland had for newcomer leaders in the area as a way of helping us build connections with each other, but also with some of the other local leaders that we have in the area. And I know when I was at CASE as well, there were programs that connected international students to local Clevelanders as a way of building relationship. And I'm asking this question reflecting on the quote that you shared, Joe, that change happens at the speed of relationship, which I think is an incredible quote, and I'm going to keep that in my back pocket. Are there other initiatives that are more targeted towards young professional, newcomers and immigrants, for them to be able to build relationships outside of their workplace, or outside of the social settings that they've been able to create for themselves, to build relationships with other Clevelanders?
Yeah, Kwame, thank you. And thanks for your participation, your leadership in the Global Rising program. And as you know, we're seeding our next class right now. So we're excited about that, and excited about the next generation of Global Rising leaders. They'll have a big shoes to fill, Kwame, with you being a star member of the first class. We are very much looking forward to the time when we can be together. Networking obviously is fun, but happens best when people can be in the same space. Some of the things that we've been working on, and Kwame, you've been part of this, have been connecting our African-American community members and our African immigrant community members. We're having a conversation right now with a few individuals in the banking industry and in the legal and engineering industry about starting to set for early next year a series of conversations that would be in person, that would really be hyper networking for individuals to get to know each other, to see how people could relate to one another, to see if businesses could collaborate or grow. One of the other things, Kwame, that we're looking to do is to really wake up the organizations in Cleveland, of which there are 43, who are eligible to accept H-1B visa holders. These are companies who have gone through the process in the last 10, 15 years that make them eligible to hire people who are coming out of universities. And one of those programs that we're working on right now, Kwame, is called the EIR, the Entrepreneur in Residence. It's a program that's been led out of Detroit, and it's really successful in Boston, where by partnering with universities, they have H-1B visa. They are limitless in terms of what they can offer. And so we're trying to think about how do we use this amazing intersection of meds and eds in Cleveland, which has clearly done so much for employment, for medical advancement, for having some of the best healthcare and some of the best schools in the country. How do we turn that into the biggest welcoming engine that we have? It's going to take a bit of a culture shift. We always, Kwame, have support at the top. CEOs love the elevator pitch, right? We can woo a CEO like the best of them. Where do dreams go to die? In the legal counsel's office. well, we don't want to run into problems with this, and I'm not sure about this, and we've never done that. And so we are really working with our board now to wrap around these organizations with loving arms and say, if we want to be the city that we can be, we have to unleash the immigrant soul that we have. And so there's a few ideas we have, from basic hyper networking to things that we're doing with the Entrepreneur in Residence program, working right now with CASE and with Cleveland State to start that program, but obviously doing anything we can to continue touching people. We're very fortunate in that we're one of the highest per capita naturalization courts in the United States of America. We were on track, Kwame, to hitting 5,000 people being naturalized every year, up from 2,600 in 2016. So we nearly doubled the number of people who are naturalizing. It's through efforts like that where we connect with people, where people get to understand these opportunities that are here, but also for the international student who only wants to go to CASE or Cleveland State for 4 years and then go home. There's things that person is already giving to this community, and we have to think about how do we continue to build that bridge, even if that individual decides to go back to China or India or Ghana, God forbid.
We can keep them like Kwame here for ourselves.
Yeah. Yes. I've been told the borders are closed permanently for Kwame to ever leave.
Yeah.
Kwame has to stay here
Kwame.
now.
Mm-hmm. Our next question is actually coming from someone you alluded to as being an ally earlier, from Ollie. Ollie, would you like to unmute yourself? And I love your background. We love our international students. It's a great motto to live by.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. A pleasure to log in from Lawrence, Kansas. And I truly miss Cleveland, a hidden gem that I will never forget. Spending two and a half years there, but somehow has made an impact. And Joe, you were instrumental in making me feel home away from home in Cleveland during my tenure at Cleveland State. So thank you for that. But I'm happy in Kansas, by the way. Just saying.
You can always come back. It's fine.
I wanted to ask Joe, the work that Global Cleveland does and the various communities that exist around the Cleveland area in welcoming the international community and the immigrant communities. I know they exist elsewhere, but I have never seen it to the level that I've seen in Cleveland. And I'm saying this having lived in 3 different countries and moving 14 times in my life. And I'm wondering whether there's an opportunity to build a pipeline that would be more national. I know that the focus of Global Cleveland is Cleveland, obviously, and Northeast Ohio. But what are the options to not necessarily elevate, but to kind of look at it to grow it exponentially so that it's serving the whole nation?
That's a great question. We have been developing and will continue to develop, Ali, one of our programs that appears to be somewhat ceremonial, somewhat fun, which it is. People don't know its potential or its depth, and that's our Sister Cities program. The Sister Cities program, as you know, was established by President Eisenhower after he had toured some of the prisoner camps in Germany after World War II, and he couldn't stand, to quote Viktor Frankl, man's inhumanity to man. How could human beings be so inhumane to one another? So he came back and he was thinking about policy in his run up to the presidency, and he created the Sister Cities program. This idea that if people got to know each other across borders, across culture, across language, they really did realize just how much we shared in common, our worries, our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations, and our perspirations. We've taken that program on through the great support of City Hall. And tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., we are going to be hosting 14 of our 24 sister cities in a conversation around culture, around our art museums, around music, around poetry and writing and dance. And in October, with the incredible leadership of the Cleveland Public Library, we're hosting for the second time, 3rd year, but second time virtually, a Sister Cities conference that last year spanned 22 nations, as many time zones, and people from 5 different continents. Next year, Ali, that's going to be in person. It's going to be in Cleveland. We've already gotten commitments from half of the mayors of the sister cities, from Lima, Peru, to Volgograd, Russia, to Beit Shan, Israel, to Ljubljana, Slovenia, to places like Ibadan, Nigeria, that people are going to be coming to Cleveland. Why? It's what you said, Ali. It's got to be a circular migration. Cleveland's got to be a destination. It's also got to be a place that people launch from. And so the idea we have as an organization is always to attract people here. Clearly, we want to grow the mothership and make Cleveland and Northeast Ohio everything that she could be and should be. But it's this idea about how do we do that. I'll share an idea that we're processing right now, and it's not public, and I'll probably get in trouble. So I'll share it with the 35 people on this call. We don't have enough kids in the city who know how to become Condoleezza Rice or Secretary Colin Powell. Right? Secretary Rice, Secretary Powell, Secretary Albright. We've got amazing kids in our communities, African-American, Puerto Rican, kids in Cleveland who don't have a passport. My dream, by 2025, every person who graduates from a Cleveland high school is automatically able to apply for it, and we support their application for a passport, right? If we really want to create the future global shapers, if we really want to create a foreign service corps out of Cleveland, the way we do that is by making international trips possible, by creating this sensibility. And so during this year's Sister City Conference, 4 of the sessions in our education platform are going to be led by kids from Greater Cleveland with students from the cities, their peers across the world, right? It's this idea about building bridges. But I think you're 100% right. There's a amazing professor, Ali. I don't know if you know him, Sergio Robles. He is Mexican-American. He teaches at OU. He is talking about a pipeline of brilliant Latino students from the border towns in Texas, where speaking Spanish is expected, whereas in other parts of the United States, it would be something that people would really be appreciative of. And so we've started talking to him about how do we create that environment for Ohio, but clearly that could be something throughout the Midwest. It really is that question about how do you get people thinking in terms of that this is a destination, not just a doorway. And that's something that we're always trying to figure out how we can make that happen.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions lined up. Next question, Ann Hill. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, Joe. Nice to see you.
Hey, Ann.
So back to the jobs question. There are a lot of immigrants in Cleveland who are not refugees and who do not have work permits. And I'm wondering, so for instance, asylum seekers who cross the border and are applying for asylum, or undocumented immigrants who came years ago and still never got a work permit. I'm wondering if you know anything about the federal government's, is there any movement within the federal government and the Department of Homeland Security to increase the number of work permits and also make them more easy to get? Because that, you know, there's so many jobs out there that would quickly be filled if people had work permits. They're dying to work.
That's a good question.
It's a great question. You know, we've been having conversations with the Ohio Landscapers Association. It's to your point exactly, Ann. They're a very regulated, infrastructured group of several thousand companies in Ohio. And they've always applied for a specific agriculture visa that the last 4 years said that landscapers weren't eligible for. So it's gotten harder and harder for them to hire native born people. And the permitting process that used to allow at least a few more never was enough. And so we're part of an organization called the Partnership for New Americans, which is working with a couple Congress people right now on some basics. A bill that would increase the funding for English as a learning language for community colleges. Something that would work toward making our DACA dreamers legal so that their work situations wouldn't be as restrictive. We've worked with a few asylum seekers, one of whom I will share with you. Don't want to get too much into it. This individual came to Cleveland from a country where she would have been put to death for her beliefs. And she has been accepted to 2 law schools that are located in the city of Cleveland, and she's trying to figure out right now where she can get the most financial support. So it really is a case-by-case basis. Global Cleveland is, we were in DC 3 times in the last 4 years lobbying for different immigration changes. And we really feel like there's actually an open ear now. And so working with our partners in Chicago and Detroit and New York and Washington, I think there's going to be some parts moving. We won't have comprehensive immigration reform, but I do think there's going to be some things that the Republican side and the Democratic side could agree on. And we're hoping that as the summer starts to, we get into it, there's going to be more serious conversations in the fall, because there's so many people that we're encountering, and like you're talking about, who are just here ready to work. It was heartbreaking when we were talking to the landscapers because, some of these individuals made enough in 6 months to take care of their families back in Mexico and Guatemala for a whole year. And they provided incredible, valuable service to the landscaping companies that wanted to hire them. True story, when we were first having the conversations, I was ready for an environment that wouldn't have been as open and understanding. I was blown away at the complexity of their desire to welcome people, not just as employees, but just, they said they make their companies better. And I think to myself, more of these individuals that talk about walls need to hear from small, family-owned, female-led, generational businesses like this that are so dependent on people to be here and to be able to work. But we continue to lobby all of our elected officials. I'll share with you. Hope I'm not breaking any news right now, but we have been working pretty quietly with our international organizations, and we are going to be announcing in the very near term candidates nights, not just for the mayor, but for all 17 council races, where the international community is going to have a chance to talk to the individuals who choose to spend their hour with us about what they would do to make Cleveland more welcoming. I say that to you, Ann, because even the news that happened tonight, everyone's focused on the mayor's race. I think as a great community organizer, as you are and always will be, we can't forget the legislature. And there's a lot of council races right now that are going to be contested. And there's a lot of people that I think we want to share with them, we need to be pulling together. And so after we get through this year, there's no endorsements. We're not doing any politicization. This is more of an education and inform. It's going to be led by our international community. But we're hoping to be able to expand that to every single electoral race in the county, including the suburbs, by the end of 2025.
Great. All right, we have time for one more question from Angel. Would you like to unmute yourself and share? Please unmute yourself, or you could use the chat, whichever is easiest for you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yes, on my side, my connection is kind of bad, shaky. But anyway, my name is Angel Galvan, and I live in the Gordon R. Square District. And gentrification is taking place there. I'm sure Joe is aware of it, where the only Mexican standing structure is located right on Detroit and 54th. Well, anyway, they're tearing it down. It's going to be torn down maybe within the month. And no one really represented the Azteca Club. There are people that actually said they were representing, but the end result, and considering that this is the only structure, social club or any other type of club, except for, of course, restaurants, there are 200 of them throughout, right? But we only have one social club, and it's going to be torn down. It's historic. It's have a 100-year history, and it's going to close down. Well, it's closed already, but it's going to be torn down, and with it, Cleveland's image of a welcoming city for immigrants and especially for Mexicans, not for, and even for Hispanics. You hear the word Hispanic, and it covers everybody, but this is at least it's misleading, because there are plenty of Hispanic structures, offices, the Hispanic Roundtable, Hispanic Alliance. You can go through a list. There's only one Mexican. So if you talk about Hispanic structures and representation, there's plenty. But if you talk about individual demographics, and you have to remember, this is the largest demographic. Mexicans represent almost 200 million residents within North America. That's from Mexico and the United States combined. That's a lot of talent to ignore. And that's what's happening now. The Mexicans are being ignored, their wishes are being ignored, and I'm one of the only persons that are actively trying to prevent this from happening. I have no one to turn to, but I will be turning to hopefully people like Joe, organizations like Joe, to help me to showcase their talents and showcase the rhetoric that they're advancing on this forum and others. There's a lot as far as like Cleveland is welcoming and it's being branded that way, but we're going to lose a little bit and it's going to become more evident down the road, not now, because our voices here, we're muted.
Thank you for sharing that.
We're marginalized because we're not the largest demographic here in Cleveland, but our voice resonates throughout the country and throughout the world because, as I said, we have 200 million people. The United States itself has 330, and Mexicans comprise, and that's within North America. Well, the Mexicans comprise 200 million in the same geography.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and so I just want to give
one more
Mr.
thing
Cimperman a chance
is
to
that
respond.
we don't know enough about immigrants and who constitutes immigrants, because we consider Puerto Ricans immigrants, and they're not.
They're not. No, that is a good point.
But guess who?
I think we're about to close up. And thank you for your comments and your questions. And Joe, would you like to have closing remarks?
I'll just say one thing. Angel, thank you. Angel, thank you for everything that you do. I was very disappointed in the way that conversation happened. And our organization had offered our support to people like Roberta Duarte and the other leaders within the Mexican American community here in Cleveland in any way that we could have been supportive, and we always will be. When I look at how to build power, I will just point one example to everyone on this call. Go to the Ukrainian Museum and Archives. For a people who are as diverse religiously, Orthodox, Muslim, down in Crimea, Catholic, Christian, agnostic, socialist, communist, they have put their Ukrainian power together in Tremont and have created the greatest Ukrainian arts and cultural center outside of Kiev.
It's beautiful.
Harvard, Ohio State University, the Library of Congress have tried to buy this amazing museum. But really what they've done through Andy Fedinsky and Mr. Shmagala, they have created a political powerhouse. And I would love to see that for the 140 communities that call Cleveland home from all over the world.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful questions. I want to give the microphone back to Kwame to close us out for this evening's conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sam, for wonderful job moderating this conversation. And thank you, Joe, for all the insight. It's always a pleasure hearing you speak. And I'm always inspired by your passion for all immigration issues. So really, really excited to be in the same city as you. And I'm excited to call you a friend. Thanks everyone for attending this event. And we have other events that will be coming up in the future. So please follow us on our social media links. Check out our website. If you go to Facebook, you'd find us as Global Shapers Cleveland. If you Google our name, you'd find our website. Please stay in touch, stay connected, and we will be sharing information about more events in the future. And please don't be shy, always reach out to us. It has been a wonderful evening with all of you. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you.